Well, let's go ahead and get started today. Again, thank you very much for joining. There'll be others joining our session as we get started today. Look, I just wanted to thank everybody for joining our RPA Industry Educational Webinar today. Our topic today is how technology-enabled reusable transport packaging can and does drive sustainability outcomes. My name is Todd Hoff. I lead member programs here at the RPA, and I'm very excited about this session and joined by some of our member companies that are really leading in this space and are really global experts in this space. Just a little bit of a background. The Reusable Packaging Association is now 26 years old, and our goal and focus is really helping industry accelerate the adoption and optimization of reusable packaging systems through education and advocacy. So today's session is really one of those examples where we're using the opportunity to really educate industry on how people are using tech-enabled reusable assets to help companies meet their sustainability goals and outcomes. As part of the RPA, we have member committees where we have our member companies participate very actively in various committees within the RPA. The first is the retail e-commerce workstream, where we have member companies that are focused on bringing more and more reuse and technology to retail and e-commerce. We also have a policy working group with member companies that are working on helping drive the adoption of reusable packaging system. And today our member companies, 4 of our member companies today are members of the technology working group. And they're all very active members in the application and using technology to enable reusable packaging, and today really focused around sustainability outcomes. One project the technology working group did about 2 or 3 months ago is our member companies worked to create what we call a technology map of all the different use cases that people today are using tech-enabled packaging to support. It starts all the way on the left about how do you enable a reusable packaging asset through the supply, transportation, distribution, transportation, destination, all the way back through reverse logistics. Our members focused on helping write and capture some of the common use cases where companies today are using tech-enabled reusable packaging. One of those use cases that we talked about as a group is really how are companies using reusable packaging to really drive sustainability outcomes. So one of the outputs of our technology map was learning and understanding how people are using tech-enabled reuse to really help them drive and meet their sustainability outcomes. And that's really the background of our session today that we're doing, is helping companies hear real-life examples of tech, reuse, and sustainability. Our agenda we're going to follow today is we're going to have our speakers just do brief introductions of themselves. And we're really going to cover 4 key topics. The first around meeting goals and metrics for sustainability. The second is some of the life cycle considerations in this area. With the third is really end of life and EPR requirements. There's a lot of things changing today, and tech-enabled reuse packaging can play a very important part of that. And then lastly, how do you use data and, more importantly, the insights to measure and validate some of the outcomes throughout the life cycle of a supply chain and also the reusable assets. And then followed by a session Q&A. Again, as we go through our session today, please use the chat button to ask any questions. We'll leave about 10 minutes at the end of our session today where myself and the panelists will do their best to answer your questions. So please ask questions as we go through the session today. I'd like now to introduce our guest speakers. We have Raman from CHEP, Kevin from Initech, Marty from Polyfuse, and Dan from Wave Reaction. These 4 people each approached this question around a sustainability use case using tech packaging. They each approach it from a different perspective and have very unique perspectives and experiences around this topic. Between these 4 companies, there's well more than 50 million reusable assets that have been enabled through one of their solutions or through the the services that these companies provide. So without further ado, let me pass it over to Raman to introduce himself and his company.
Thank you, Doug. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me and attending this session. My name is Raman Thavar. I lead digital solutions for CHEP in North America. For those of you who are less familiar with CHEP, we are one of the world's largest asset pooling organization. So that's pallets, containers, crates. And you may have seen a much larger version of this pallet in like a grocery store or retail store, blue color. That's us. But it's not the color of the pallet itself that differentiates us. It's the business model behind it. So if you look at the left-hand side of the slide that Todd has on the screen, we have 750 plus service centers around the world. That's where we issue our assets from. We'll issue an asset to our customer. The customer will put their product on that pallet or asset, and then that'll go through their supply chain, eventually end up at a retailer. The retailer, once it's done, the pallet or asset has done its job, then the asset makes it back to our service center. We inspect it for quality, we repair it if we have to, and then we put it back out in the supply chain. So this reuse, this loop of reuse repeats itself on a massive scale. And that scale and that circularity gives us a couple of advantages. First, it should not be surprising that we get an immense sustainability advantage out of it. Right? It's been validated and accredited many times across years and decades, most recently by Times Magazine in 2025. It also gives us a lot of operational data and big unmatched network density of sorts. And imagine making that network, that number of assets smart, like the kind of things you can start to ask and start to answer. So you can start to answer things around, where the real bottlenecks in the supply chain, where's most of the dwell time, where the assets are. You can start to get more visibility and traceability on your supply chain. And that's what our teams are doing. My part of that CHEP is doing. So I belong to the digital team in CHEP. And digital has been an area where we have been investing for the last several years, and it's core to our strategy. There are three main areas where we are using digital. I'd say the first one is more around efficiency of our operations, our assets. We want to track them to reduce any sort of friction, to increase customer experience as well. The second one is using those smart assets, using that smart infrastructure to help our customers get more visibility to their supply chain so they can alleviate some of those issues. And third one is just exploring new ideas, exploring new value streams. So those are kind of three areas where we are focusing and what our teams have been commercializing for the last few years. What we're doing is using the decades and wealth of supply chain experience and data that we have, we're combining it with a digital platform. And that digital platform is now fueled by several different types of technology, including an IoT tech, which is a sensor that looks like a device that looks like this, which has multiple sensors in it. And this travels with the pallet. And you can see a part of that in the bottom right-hand side of your slide. So that's what we've been commercializing. As Todd said, we'll bring in our perspective from that angle in the conversation today. Look forward to the rest of the conversation today. Thank you for joining, and pass it back to Todd.
All right. So I'll let Kevin from Innotek give a little background and what he does at Innotek.
Sure. Thanks, Todd. Can you hear me? Because everything froze up on me.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, cool. Yes, Kevin Murray, work with Innotek. I handle sales for the North American operations and I guess now South American operations. And Innotek has been providing barcode and RFID labels to the returnable container industry for the past 40 years. So whether it's plastic or metal or wood or ESD, we've got an adhesive solution that will work both in the barcode or RFID end of things. Our niche product, though, is our in-mold RFID labels and our in-mold barcode labels. These labels get molded right into the plastic container during the injection molding process, and they become a permanent part of the container. They're durable, they can't fall off, they don't get pulled off, they're washable, they're hygienic, they're economical. They're the perfect way to identify a reusable plastic tote. And that's it. So pretty easy stuff, pretty simple stuff, but we've got a lot of great customers out there, a couple of you on board here today. And thank you, Todd, for including me and setting this program up. Appreciate it.
Great. Thanks very much, Kevin. Our next speaker is Marty with Polyfuse. Marty, a brief introduction.
Great. Thanks for having me today, Todd, and appreciate everybody joining. Polyfuse is a family-owned company. As it says here, we've been around for 40 plus years. We are a label maker, but we specialize in a technology that we call polymer fusion labeling. And it's a label that's made specifically for olefinic materials, polypropylene, polyethylene in particular. It can be applied with standard hot stamp equipment, and once it's in place, it is guaranteed to remain with the asset for life. The best part about it is that the asset is made from polymer. We're just fusing two materials together, so it can be recycled at the end of the product's life cycle. That's why we refer to it as a monomaterial label. We do work really closely with a lot of RPA member companies and other manufacturers. We have a whole ecosystem. We are a label maker, but somewhat of a system integrator. When a customer comes to us, we help them with the label, selecting of the label, but then also finding the proper application equipment, and then finding a company that can help them with the hardware and software side of things as well, too. And really appreciate being here. Thanks for setting it up, Todd.
Great. Thanks, Marty. And our last panelist is Dan from Wave Reaction. Dan, an overview.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. And thanks, everybody, for the time today. So like Todd said, my name is Dan Violi. I run a company called Wave Reaction, and we're a software company that's been powering returnable container management programs for over 25 years. Functionally, we operate as a system of record for our clients, which are primarily, complex, large OEMs. And we turn containers into actionable data that they can leverage to make their operations more efficient and effective. Along with our software, we'll provide process advisory for these clients of ours. These programs are often, complicated, involve a lot of stakeholders. So we help sort of bring all those pieces together, and we'll also, provide supporting hardware and related solutions to make the whole thing work. As far as our product set, you can see in that top right quadrant of this slide, we've got our returnable container management platform, which is really our flagship, product that consists of an array of functionality to power and automate the management of a large, complex returnables fleets. But we also have ancillary offerings that support the broader OEM packaging operation, most notably like Plan for Every Part. And those snap in to a single user experience, making it really easy to not only manage a big, expensive fleet of assets, but also continually optimize and onboard new parts to be leveraged with that sort of technology. So it's a little bit about sort of how we fit into the value stream.
Great. Thank you very much, Dan. Again, let's go ahead and jump into our session today. Again, as we start, if anybody has questions, please add them to the chat, and we'll spend the last 5 or 10 minutes of our session today really helping answer some of those questions and share experiences to some of your questions specifically. Let me go ahead and stop sharing. I find when we do panel sessions, it's always better to see folks. I think is great. So kind of our first topic today is really, how companies today are meeting sustainability goals and metrics that are today enabled by tech-enabled packaging. Kind of my first question to the panelists today would be, so what are the sustainability goals that companies today are most commonly trying to achieve with reusable packaging? How does tech-enabled packaging help improve some of those measurements? Is it product damage reduction, waste elimination, or just maintaining their assets? So maybe to get us started on this first question, Raman, maybe we'll start with you. Kind of what is your experiences on, again, how companies are meeting their sustainability goals with tech-enabled packaging?
Yeah, thanks for that, Todd. I would say the big goals still have to be carbon reduction and waste elimination, right? Those have to be big too, depending on the industry now. They could be more specific than that. And waste could be operational waste, labor waste, all of that, and food waste. And that food waste piece is where our teams are spending a lot of time on as well, right? There's 1.4 billion tons of food waste between harvest and retail. And not only that, it's compounded by GHG emissions, like 8 to 10% that go into producing that food. So it's a big problem. Technology can help us alleviate some of those issues just by providing traceability, where stuff is, real-time info. It can provide root causes to some of the issues as well that can help us eliminate some of that waste and start to provide predictive insights and information on how do we eliminate it going forward as well. So I think not only technology can help us alleviate some of these sustainability issues, but it can do so by also helping us with operational improvement and, most importantly, consumer expectations as well. Because all of us know as consumers, we want things better, faster, cheaper, right? So I think the combination of all of that is where technology plays a big role in alleviating.
Great. How about you, Kevin, from your perspective on, what are the most common things your customers are asking around meeting sustainability goals with your solutions?
Well, I think, paramount that I see is eliminating the single-use packaging. Two things. One, you're reducing the waste going to the landfill. And then two, single-use packaging always, well, I shouldn't say always, but it leads to product damage. So eliminating that single-use packaging is pretty paramount. Raman touched on the carbon footprint. And when you look at, if you buy one reusable tote and that reusable tote lasts 5 to 10 years, and then compare that to the expendable packaging that you would have purchased and thrown in the landfill over that 5 to 10 year period, it's crazy. So, that's also important. And right in line with that is they want to reduce their raw material requirements in their operations.
Yeah, great. How about you, Marty? How in your discussions with your customers do you cover kind of sustainability goals and tech-enabled packaging? But Marty, you're muted.
Todd.
There you go.
Great topic. I don't know how many people we have on the webinar that are attending from Europe, but for the people that are here in the US, they should know that extended producer responsibility, packaging waste reduction are big items that are coming our way. So, Raman touched on the waste reduction aspect. It's really a big component. It comes up a lot with us. We talk a lot with recyclers also. They're the people that have to deal with it at the end of life. Definitely want to go into that a little bit more as we can. But, I think in addition to waste reduction, it's just an overall efficiency picture. If the labels are there to collect data, it's a waste pickup thing as well as an efficiency pickup as well. But are you compatible, essentially? Are you creating a product that is going to have long-term recyclability? Is it going to create waste for somebody later on? Recyclers have to deal with that, whether it's a contaminant, a label that they have to remove before recycling, or a label they have to deal with as part of the recycling process that sets off an alarm, or ultimately contaminates the recycle it. So I think that's a big topic we have talked with a lot, specifically in the last year with recyclers about.
Great. How about you, Dan? In your experiences with some of your customers, how does the topic of sustainability and data and tech-enabled, how does that connect with some of your customers and experiences?
Yeah, I mean, in practice, I think so Kevin mentioned this idea of having a returnable packaging for 5 years. It's like kind of a breathtaking difference in terms of the sustainability impact. I think where we get a lot of traction with clients is going from a pre-measurable state where sustainability assertions are based on assumptions to a post-measurable state where we can say, hey, here's the actual data. Here's the number of trips, here's the number of years, here's how long these items have been in the fleet on average, that really can support assertions around sustainability. So, part of having this tech-enabled packaging is giving you a lot more data to make really strong operational decisions, insights, but even just the baseline data, the fact that now we have serialized data on our packaging fleet, it enables us to really level up what we can say with certainty versus what we just can assume with moderate confidence. And I think to tie in what Marty was talking about legislation, the standard of evidence is getting higher and higher. Like the CFO's level of certainty around assertions and reporting is starting to look a lot like what the sustainability officer's assertions and bar is going to look like. So the data element is getting more and more important, and so we're finding folks come to us and say, hey, can we measure this? Can we measure that? How can we get more certainty with the process supporting the technology? And when we're successful, it's a big win-win.
Great example and great connection back to the data, right? There's always a lot of assumptions around sustainability, and today with tech-enabled reusable packaging, you can actually not only have the data and the insights, but you can actually make decisions from that data, which I think is important for companies. 100%. So I'm curious, Kevin. Kevin, I know you and your company were a past award winner last year. Maybe could you share an example of kind of applications where you did perhaps your plant tray that your company did last year, and again, where companies are using technology to help them improve sustainability or help them meet some of the future EPR regulations, Kevin?
Yeah, certainly. So an example of that I can use was actually here in the States, where we were brought into a company and they already had a returnable packaging program in place. They were using knockdown bins. I think they had close to 10,000 of them. It was a big medical distribution company. They had a hub in the Midwest. They would ship out to 12 DCs, excuse me, and those DCs would ship to the end users in their region. The problem was the hub would run out of knockdown containers, and they would have to go out and purchase expendable packaging. And two problems with that. The expendable packaging wasn't in the budget, number one. And number two, product got damaged, and their products were expensive. We're talking tens and tens of thousands of dollars. So, like I said, they brought us in. We partnered up with some people. We took the bins, put RFID labels, 2 RFID labels on each of the bins. They put RFID readers on the dock doors. The tracking system was downloaded to the site. We also built in acceptable return rates for the assets. So the DCs that were closer, like the ones in Kentucky, had like a 4 or 5 day return rate, and the ones that were in Seattle had a 12 or 15 day return rate. And then overnight, the company would communicate with our system, and what they would do is they would give us these dock door assignments for that next day. So dock door 1 was going to Kentucky, dock door 2 was going to Seattle, and so forth and so on. So now we knew everything going in dock door 1 was going to Kentucky, everything going to dock door 2 was Seattle, and then we had those acceptable return rates. So we could send out an aging report every day, every couple days or whatever, to the DCs listing what needed to be returned, what was kind of in the red zone that was past return date. So this gave them this great visibility in their system, and again, eliminated that problem that they had of going to and having to buy the expendable packaging, which was an expense, but would also lead to damage.
Sure. Great example of sometimes people forget that if you don't know where things are, you end up buying a bunch of single-use stuff you throw away. So expendable packaging. So that's great, Kevin. Raman, maybe last question to you here is maybe some examples where you've been able to work with tech-enabled packaging to help customers meet sustainability improvements and goals. Raman?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you a recent waste reduction example. We have a large berry producer that works with us. ships into one of the largest retailers. And they were running into quality and rejection concerns. And, then the waste will be going to landfill. So a big concern for them. The good thing is both retailer and the producer have the same goal. They want to give or supply a better quality, better to the consumers, to us, right? So when they adopted our digital solutions, they started getting, as Kevin said, they started getting visibility to their supply chain, right? They knew what's happening from the cooler to DC to store. They get visibility to all of that, and they started to pinpoint where issues are happening, where quality is compromised. It was primarily due to temperature fluctuations. So they were able to fix that issue. But while they were doing it, there was a lot of sharing insights and sharing information between them and the retailer and us, right? So they were able to create this sort of collaboration, sort of trust between these three parties, which then led to them gaining a whole lot of market share. They gained like 30% market share in that retailer. The bottom line of, I think, that example is there is a lot of value from people and organizations adopting these sort of digital solutions, digital technologies, not just from operational benefits, which there are from profit margin increase, but also for running responsible and more sustainable business. You can drive that waste away from landfill. I would highlight one more thing. You were talking about the requirements and regulations that are coming up from our point of view. What we are keeping a whole lot of tabs on is FSMA, which is Food Safety Modernization Act. And some of you may know they're coming up with a new article, which makes it you have to increase traceability requirements for certain perishable categories. Not that it's implemented, it won't be implemented anytime soon either, but it's already making players in the supply chain behave differently. They're already starting to put checks in place and things in place to address not only requirements for FSMA, but going way beyond it, right? So that's technology is helping us and helping them to address some of those issues beyond compliance and regulations as well.
Sure, great examples. Let's move on to our second topic. Our second topic today is the idea of how do you look at the sustainability lifecycle considerations, all the way from how do you design your system, all the way to the beginning, which is what are some of the considerations when you're considering a reusable asset or some of the technologies you have on that asset. So to get us started on this topic, we'll kind of start with what does designing for sustainability mean in the context of reusable tech-enabled packaging systems. And so Marty, maybe we'll start with you on this first one. And so designing for sustainability as you're looking at technologies, what does that mean, or what are some of your experiences at Polyfuse?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. That's a good question. When we think about technology, I think a lot of people they're thinking about hardware and software, but material is certainly an aspect of that. Polymer is part of that. You think back to when we were kids, all the trash cans were made of metal. The lawnmower I mowed my family's lawn had all metal parts, the car parts. So polymers have replaced steel and aluminum as the dominant material in manufacturing for good reason. The reason that manufacturers are choosing it, there's economical reasons, nestable pallets, durability, obviously. And then when it comes to that, I really appreciate that Raman touched on the food safety aspect. And even though that might, again, like with extended producer responsibility, although it's not as big of an item right now in the US, it is soon becoming a bigger issue. And for us with labeling, when you think of a topical labeling method, polymers by their nature, there was a quote actually from a gentleman named Phil Dodge with Equistar Chemicals that I remembered, who was in Rhoda for a long time. And he said that polymers by nature really don't lend themselves to topical and adhesion-based labeling methods. So when you have a technology like what we do with Polyfuse, it fuses in, not only is it going to remain in place for the life of the asset, scannability will be there, it's recyclable at the end of the life cycle. It's also a label type that is excellent for food safety concerns. Traditional labeling methods, adhesive-based labeling methods do present areas where microbes can harbor. So I think when you're thinking about designing, you have to consider from beginning to end, is it going to work for you throughout the whole life cycle for whatever your purposes are? But I do want to emphasize again, and I'll come back to this, that we have to think about the recyclers at the end of life who have to deal with whatever assets we're creating. So that certainly should be a consideration.
Great, great, Marty. How about you, Dan? Kind of when you work with a customer and you start talking about the system, what does design for sustainability typically mean with your customers?
Yeah, so Marty, you kind of stole my thunder there. That was such a good ending to your response. I think that, it's easy to think of, hey, we just want to track. We want visibility, and to be sure, that is, at least in my mind, kind of the paramount end to get after here, right? Like we've seen folks who come to us and say, hey, we spent X millions of dollars on returnables N years ago. We can't keep track. We don't know how much we're losing, but we do know that there is less today than there was before. And so we stopped buying returnables because until we figure this out. And that's kind of just like tough to hear. It certainly keeps us in business to some extent, but you don't want that from an operational standpoint. It's rife with waste. And so, having that visibility, it sort of justifies the investments. That's sort of the bottom of the hierarchy of needs. But what Marty said about end of life, I think, is really insightful, because when you start to design actually like a technology solution to power a program or to power a fleet, you need to think about serialization and labeling and what makes the most sense within the supply chain that is idiosyncratic to your organization. In some cases, that might be, fused labels. In some cases, it might be, RFID versus barcode versus BLE, who knows? We're a hardware agnostic solution provider. So we often are going in, walking the process and saying, hey, this will make sense for this class of assets. That makes sense for these others. Don't do this. It makes no sense here. So that matters a lot. But the piece that Marty got that I thought was really interesting is, we are often thinking about the definition of sustainability by the potential client, how they define this, because it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, tailoring the data architecture around that definition, and then critically thinking about both, day one commission of the asset and then end of life disposition, and making sure that there's a process at end of life. It's not just, hey, we had this asset for 7 years and then God knows what happened to it, because then you just do a bunch of hard work and a lot of planning and a lot of management to have an incomplete story. So you have to be have a little bit of foresight when you design these programs, for sure.
Great. How about you, Kevin? Kind of when you work with customers that say, customers, and you're looking at sustainability and your solutions, how do you typically answer, or maybe what are some examples that you've dealt with on this topic?
Well, for design for sustainability, the product needs to be durable, so that if it's durable, you're maximizing the use. When you maximize the use, you're maximizing lifespan and you're maximizing your ROI. Also, is it going to be circular? When the asset's no longer usable or it's obsolescent, can it be recycled? And how easily can it be recycled? And then lastly, I think, or maybe not lastly, but does it return well? So meaning, can it be broken down or can it be nested to maximize the return ratio?
For sure. That reminds me, Marty. Marty shared with me before that think about a reusable asset. It lasts 5, 7, 10 years. It's so important that not only does your asset last, but can you identify that asset in the future? Marty, maybe you could add a little bit more on that topic.
Well, and that is the figure that we normally use, Todd, 10 years for an asset, say a pallet, and you want to see that asset reach the end of life and then be able to be turned into another pallet and recycled. But if there's contaminant issues to deal with, it degrades the ability to recycle that asset. I think one of the questions is people should ask, why are we using polymers in the first place? And it's undoubtedly because of their durability, reusability, hygienic, washability, life cycle performance, and ultimately their recyclability.
Right. And then Raman, kind of last on this topic of kind of the life cycle, as you think about your solutions, adding tech-enabled visibility helps performance, but also helps total cost of ownership for your customers. I'm curious, how in your experiences is adding tech-enabled visibility help you and your customers?
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to what Marty and Kevin and Dan were saying earlier, I would say all of that durability, reusability, recyclability, all of that is essential when we're designing these products. But another important factor is performance in real world scenarios and how do you test for it. So relying on that data to help you emulate real life scenarios where you can, then you can design your product for it. And sometimes you may just have to make small changes, process changes, not even product changes.
Sure.
And we have an innovation center in Orlando and a test track where we do that, where we test our products, customer products for, we emulate real life scenarios with temperature, humidity, we hit things with forklifts and all of that, right? So we emulate those scenarios to figure out, can they stand the test of real world? So I think just for durability, reusability, and quality of the product, that's very, very important. And from this sort of question on total cost of ownership and sustainability, I think they're both connected. The key there is continuous improvement. Right? So how do you continue to build up from what you're improving on? I'll give you an example. We have a private label manufacturer that ships into one of the big retailers, and they were running into an issue of the product will burst at times before reaching the retailer. Right? So now they're having to reship this product, so which is cost, and then having to replace that as well. So there's and the product that's been wasted is also going to landfill. So there's some sustainability impact there as well. So when they adopted the digital solutions, they started to look at their supply chain end to end. And very quickly, they realized the issue was actually at one 3PL that they were using. So they can, it's targeted, they know how to fix it, they fixed it. But while they were fixing it, they also realized they're pretty close to having breaches at other 3PLs as well. So now they can proactively fix that as well and eliminate some of the potential sustainability and total cost of ownership impacts on their P&L as well. So I think both of them are connected. And again, adopting some of these solutions, whether it's RFID, QR code, IoT, can help address both.
Great. Great examples. Great examples. I'd like to go ahead and move to our third topic, and this is tech-enabled packaging and how it's being used to meet end of life and also EPR requirements. For our audience on the phone today, there's just so many things happening today around end of life and EPR across the U.S., but also in Europe with PPWR, and some of their regulations happening. I'm curious. Again, we'll go back to the panel. How can tech-enabled packaging or technologies in general help organizations both meet the compliance of some of these new mandates that are coming, but also around waste reduction mandates and even food waste reduction, even FSMA. And again, a question to the panels today, how are you, or what examples can you share where you're working with customers around EPR or end of life kind of mandates? And Dan, maybe we'll start with you on this question.
Yeah, I mean, EPR is a really interesting one because it's so dynamic, right?
Yep.
Like, what state of the play is today versus the last, large RPA event I was at is materially different, and it will be 6 months from now as well. We're all kind of observing, learning, and adapting as we go. And in practice, what we're finding at Wave is, I mentioned in kind of the intros what our solution set involves. So there's this returnables management platform, but there's also a plan for every part. So we house a lot of packaging data for OEM clients, and one of the easy ancillary deliverables associated with the packaging data management solution is EPR compliance reporting and things like that. And as we've gone to market with that new capability, we're having conversations with different OEMs and hearing just vastly different sort of approaches that are currently in place. The incumbent methodology from company one to company two, one of them is spending countless hours gathering data and putting together, elaborate reporting structures. And the other is kind of just like, seems to be finger in the air methodology, kind of, I think it's this. And so, a robust tech-enabled protocol for reporting and tracking is going to be the standard. I think right now people don't know in a lot of cases what good looks like. There's not a shared definition of good. There's a lot of assumptions. I think it's in probably everybody's long-term best interest to over-index on data visibility technology and maybe stringent interpretation of guidelines, because ultimately, like, everybody who's remotely familiar with this stuff knows that the costs that are being contemplated are incredibly real and substantial. So we're seeing a lot of different approaches being employed. Those that are more tech forward, to me, strike me as a lot more compelling and risk appropriate.
Great examples. Kevin, kind of your perspective of end of life and the EPR mandates that you're working with customers on today.
Yeah, certainly. Do have a real life experience that I can share where we were walking with the customer, going through the sites, doing a final walkthrough, and we passed this one area of the plant where they just had this pile of pallets, and we were like, "What's that?" And he's like, "Oh, that's the pallet graveyard." He goes, "We take them here when they're all broken, we can't use them anymore, and then every so often we have a regrinder come pick them up." And he goes, and then, a light bulb popped up in his head. He said, "Hey, maybe you can help us out here." He goes, "Because I really don't think I'm getting credited from the regrinder to for what he picks up every time." So yeah, it was an easy fix. What we did is we just put an RFID reader right outside the pallet graveyard. And so two things. Number one, he had an instant inventory of everything that was being shipped to the regrinder, but then he also had all the data for his EPR requirements. So, every asset that was going to the regrinder, he had evidence where it was going and how it was being circulated into real life.
Right. Great example. Raman, how about you from an end of life or EPR mandates that you're hearing from your customers or industries you play in?
I would say just in general with regulations, right? They act as a catalyst for especially for what we are trying to do. There's EPR, I think, is still in less than 10 states in the US, so we'll see how it continues to accelerate and get implemented. But it is getting implemented in like EPR or similar requirements across the globe. So there's infrastructure investment going into it everywhere. The good news is the things that you need for EPR or similar requirements or regulations, it's the same infrastructure that you need for the technology you're putting in for traceability as well, because it can start to give you visibility. It can start to demonstrate like recovery rate, reuse rates, all of that. To Kevin's example as well, right? So all of that can happen with the same infrastructure. And as I was saying earlier, even with regulation outside of EPR2 around food waste, we can see a real life example of how it's accelerating, how different stakeholders are behaving in the supply chain because of that. They're going way beyond regulations just because they have identified there is value for them. There is value. There's either cost elimination, there's more sales growth, and they can run the business better with that as well. So that's just going to continue to accelerate, and we are seeing that in multiple industries with our customer base too.
Great answer, Robin. Hey, Marty, I'm curious, as EPR and packaging accountability expand, how does a permanent asset ID kind of help companies prove that reuse, recovery, recycled circularity, all the way to end of life? Kind of what have your experiences been around that?
Well, Todd, working with Polyfuse and then being active in RPA, I have the privilege of working with so many different companies, manufacturers, pooling companies, and users. And obviously, everyone's thinking about how to efficiently move all these products that we consume more and more, right? How to get them there, not just efficiently, but if it's food, safely. But throughout all of our dealings, one item, sustainability, seems to come to top of mind. And it really is, it's exciting. It's really an exciting time because it is something that people do take into consideration. To answer the question with regard to the permanent label, obviously, if you've done all the work to put an infrastructure in place and you're trying to track efficiencies, data collection is so important if you've spent the money on the hardware and software. So the experiences we've had is with people coming to us because they do have label failures. That does exist. And if the label's not there, you don't get to capture the data. Equally important at end of life, and I'm reminding everybody, we're talking about polymers here when it comes to polyfuse. Labels can and are a contaminant. It is waste and something that has to be dealt with at end of life. But it is very refreshing to see that pretty much from A to Z, every customer we deal with, not just because of ERP regulations or EPR regulations, but because sustainability is an important thing to them. It is something that most companies see as a badge of honor to take that into consideration.
Great, great. Well, look, let's move on to kind of our last topic today. And this is, how companies are using tech-enabled reusable packaging data and insights to kind of measure and validate sustainability. So kind of my first question to the panel today would be, what tech-enabled examples can you share where companies have used kind of that tech-enabled packaging to drive utilization or movement or lifecycle impacts that are improving kind of the sustainable outcomes for the OEM, but also across the supply chain? And again, Dan, I think we'll start with you here, as you have a lot of experience around data and insights from the movement of reusable assets.
Yeah, no, happy to comment here. It's a great question. There's a couple of things that are probably worth noting here. I mean, one of the exciting things that we've been seeing with our sustainability-related conversations with clients over the last, few years is there's a real convergence of like sustainability, excellence in sustainability, and operational excellence. Like they're kind of the same thing in my mind in a lot of cases. And I think if you're doing it right, you can really kind of nail them both at the same time. And so when we think about how technology can enable greater efficacy and really drive metrics in the right directions, the most buy-in from the stakeholders who you need to influence to get things done in complex OEM organizations, for example, comes from when you can really position something as this is not just a sustainability activity, it's that and an operational improvement. And as far as examples of getting that done, once you have serialized asset visibility in your supply chain, insights just start coming in from all angles, right? You can really easily understand if you're an automotive OEM and you have pooled packaging that's going across a broad supply base, you can understand it and very easily which suppliers are holding on to this longer than others. And that might not be a bad thing, right? Some suppliers may have certain build schedules that require them to have longer on-hand inventory, but hey, you can also incorporate that into your solution. So you can put those next to each other and really start to flag exceptions upstream in a fairly automated way and then drive change. So, we're commonly working with clients to really tailor the way that their data is being presented to decision makers, such that they can see it and drive down loss rate, improve turns, improve useful life of their assets. And to an earlier question you posed, Todd, it all just drives down total cost of ownership and dually supports sustainability outcomes. So once you start getting that data visibility, that's the hard part. Then it's just a matter of making sense of the data and taking action.
Right, great. Raman, I'm curious, what are some of your experiences again around you have tech-enabled assets? How are you using data and insights to help customers make better decisions?
Yeah, before I give you the example, I think I'll also point out, we can't go in with tech-centered sort of perspective. We have to go with problem-centered perspective. What are we trying to solve? What is the use case? And all these technologies have a role to play. It doesn't matter if it's QR code or a barcode, or could be passive technologies, could be active technology. They have different costs and pros and cons. So it could be a hybrid approach in most of these cases. to alleviate some of those problem areas. So that, if we start with that, we were working with one of the big garden seed providers, and if you know that industry, most of their sales occur in pre-spring window. And they have a 10-week window where most of their sales in the year happen, and mostly through these stand-up promotional displays that you see in the stores. They typically have zero visibility on when these things are out of their DC. They don't know when they show up in the store. They don't know when they're set up. They don't know how long they stay there for, even though they pay retailers for that space, right? So it's critical. Every day delay in when they're set up is a big impact on their sales. So with digital solutions, they had the visibility. They can start to see when these things are in the store, when they are set up, how long they're there for. They don't have to send people in now, right? So earlier they were sending people in to check every, so many days to whether it's set up, whether it's there still for this long. And you can eliminate all those trips. And they eliminated all those trips, and there's a huge operational savings. And you can only imagine the sustainability savings at the end of it as well through all that. So just with that, minor visibility to their own supply chain, you can start to see the life cycle impacts of these technologies as well.
Great. Kevin, how about your perspective on how are customers using data from your solutions to help make better decisions, just not only operationally, but also to help them meet their sustainability objectives?
Yeah, one of the things that I don't think we've talked about, but it is like repair and repair of the assets, and to us it's important, and to the customers it's important, because if they can repair an asset, it extends the lifespan of the asset. So, and I know in working with in some of our projects where we took data points at the repair, at the maintenance center, and why is that important? So, well, you also have a read of where it was prior to being repaired. So now you have data of, okay, who's damaging these returnable containers? And usually it's the old 80-20 rule. It's usually one or two of the people that are companies that are involved, and when you have those data points, you can eliminate the damage, right? You have a meeting with the company that's damaging them, and hopefully, in the future, it's not going to be damaged. So, that's important because again, you're extending the life of that asset. So fewer repairs, greater efficiency, greater ROI, more turns.
Great. All great examples. We're coming up on time in about 5 minutes. So if anybody has questions, please add that to the chat. I do see one note here from McGill, again, around continue to push regulations and sustainability standards in the industry. And look, the RPA absolutely agrees with this. We have a member committee called the Policy Working Group, where that group is actively working to steer regulations, to provide industry education to lawmakers and regulators to really understand the benefits of not just reusable packaging, but when you start to add technology to reusable packaging, it creates many more opportunities, as our team shared here today. Maybe just a few last questions to the panel. One would be, if you think about the next 5 years and you think about data, you think about AI, you think about tech-enabled reusable packaging, how do you think that's going to reshape the future of supply chains really in the next 5 years? And Marty, maybe we'll start with you on this one, on data, AI, and how do you think supply chains are going to change with tech-enabled reusable packaging, Marty?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on something to answer the question that Raman said a minute ago with the hybrid approach, because we do see that a lot. I think having a redundancy, a belt and suspenders approach. I mean, obviously RFIDs are very popular right now, but use of a backup barcode, QR code, human readable certainly makes a lot of sense. So I'm glad you touched on that. Yep. To touch the question, it's moving quickly. I said a little bit ago, it's a very exciting time. there's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle, right, between label makers and manufacturers and pooling companies and hardware and software guys. The RPA certainly helps bring all of that together. I mean, RPA, I think, will play a very important role in helping your typical manufacturer. I think I've used the story many times in conversations with you, Todd, about visiting a manufacturer a couple of years ago, and there was a production lead, and he really didn't know where to go. He didn't really understand where to turn because things are moving so quickly. And I said, yeah, the RPA is a great place to get that information. So the answer is, I don't know if anybody really knows, but
Sure.
the RPA is doing a lot to kind of bring that together. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, sustainability, regulatory requirements coming down the pipeline are forcing people to think about things they haven't thought about before: packaging waste reduction, end of life, and sustainability. I've said it more than once in this, and I will just say again that spending a lot of time with recyclers. There's a gentleman we've become friends with. His name is Rick Demko from a company called Polyflex. The recyclers really are the unsung heroes of the industry. They do have to deal with these products at the end of life, so we should be taking them into consideration. Can the asset be recycled efficiently and cleanly at the end of its life? And I do think that's a misconception about recycling, is that it's easily dealt with in the end of life, and it most certainly is not. There is waste there that has to be dealt with by recyclers, and that needs to be taken into consideration.
Great. Kevin, a short answer: AI, data, reuse, tech-enabled reusable packaging in the next 5 years. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just see the technology making the visibility even more granular. So just, 5 years ago compared to 10 years ago compared to now, it's crazy, the technology that has taken place. So I see it becoming, much more granular. I also see systems becoming more interoperable. So not only internally, like say between a tracking company and their customer, but also across companies and across industries as well. And then more standardization, pooling, group ownership. That's where I see it going.
Okay. Raman, how about a quick 1-minute answer on AI, data, tech-enabled packaging? Kind of what do you think happens in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I would say the primary thing is, I talked about part of the challenge is people want things, cheaper, faster, better. But then the world needs less, like we need less waste, less carbon and all of that. So technology plays a big role in solving for that challenge. We already have the tools, whether it's AI, whether it's, computer vision or IoT or RFID, all of them have a role to play. I think the big thing though is we need to come together as supply chain experts, as supply chain industry to solve for those issues, and adopt those technologies, adopt those tools, and we have done it before. This is before my time, Todd. Maybe you would know when you were at Jeff, right? Before my time, like we came up as an industry to adopt standardized pallet size, right? And that drove a lot of efficiencies. That drove a lot of sustainability outcomes as well, right? So that's sort of needs to happen. There'll be more, we have this shared source of truth with data generated from all those devices, all those technologies, what we can share, what insights can we contribute, and how do we help each other to come up with that, to use that shared source of truth. I think that's going to be critical to how technology adoption takes place.
Great. Hey, and Dan, kind of last question. Again, AI, data, tech-enabled packaging, kind of where do you think it's going in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm a company that owns a fleet of returnables or tech-enabled packaging, I mean, I don't know what the future is going to look like. It will look different. I can say that with certainty. That's about all I can give you. But what I can say with certainty is that like these tools are powerful. They're getting more powerful, and it's an exciting time to be in the software world. Companies that effectively leverage AI in the future will have a material competitive advantage over those who don't. And the only way that you can really sort of 100% certainty set yourself up for success on that front is rolling out really strong data capture mechanisms. Returnable packaging fleets are a great opportunity to capture really valuable operational data. And so if you put the right building blocks in place today as an OEM or anybody who's a fleet owner, Whatever tools come around, come down the pike in the future, you'll be really well positioned to capitalize.
Great answer, Dan. Well, look, we're coming to the end of our hour. Again, I just wanted to thank everybody who was able to join today. Again, I'll add in the chat right now, if you've not visited the RPA website, it's reusables.org. It's a great resource with so much information. We only had an hour today to kind of touch on the beginning of our discussion, but we've added an RPA knowledge AI engine on our site, where we've taken now more than 25 years of our industry and member knowledge into an AI engine. So you can ask some of the questions you've heard today. You can get deeper in this. Again, please visit reusables.org. Try out our knowledge engine. And again, I just wanted to thank our panelists today for spending an hour with everybody. So thanks everybody for joining, and have a great rest of your Friday. Thank you.